Okay, so good afternoon from Jakarta, human rights enthusiasts. I hope those who are watching this are blessed with this delightful day. Allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Nadine Shirani Salsabila, just sitting here as your current A3T Secretariat. So, in remembrance of the International Day of the of the elimination of violence against women, we will be discussing a lot and thoroughly in regards to the increasing number of violence against women during the pandemic that has been happening for more than 2 years now. And just to give a little bit of a heads up, violence is a behavior involving not only physical but also psychological force that intended to not only hurt but also damage and even to the point of killing someone or something. Now, this is a very different thing from what we're going to discuss further about the violence against women. So, it is a complete different thing. Whereas the UN Women has stated before in 2020 that more than 37% of women in South Asia, 40% of women in Southeast Asia, and 68% women in the Pacific have experienced rape, psychological, and physical abuse of violence from men. Now, this violence is not only done from family members such as the breadwinner and or the male siblings, but also from friends, co-worker, partners, and even other family members, and even from the online community. So the heartbreaking data leads us to question ourselves, including women. Thus, this International Day really bring impact and remind to us all that this issue is going to be abolished or solved or not. And to answer this question, today I will be happily guide our beloved speakers to elaborate their opinion on the respective countries regarding the issue for violence against women and their thoughts and also elaboration regarding the government's solution and attitude towards the issue. And last but not least, we will also talk more about the ideals of the preventive action towards violence against women. And also here, so I will not be talking alone. Of course, I will invite several great women to start this webinar or this discussion. First things first, I will invite Miss Susan Rizal, the CEO of Nagarik Awas from Nepal. Hi, Miss Susan.
Hi, hello.
Hello, Miss Susan.
Thank you so much for
Okay, it's very nice
inviting in
to.
this forum.
Yeah, no, we are also grateful for you to participate in this webinar. Really hoping to give us a lot of elaboration for this webinar today. Okay, next I will also invite our second speaker, our second great woman for today, Miss Nisha Sabayanagam. She is the Executive Director of AWAM from Malaysia. So, hi, Miss Nisha.
Hi, it's really an honor to be here. I'm really glad to be able to represent Malaysia, and we are such close neighbors. We're next door to each other, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I know,
Thank
right?
you so much for having us here.
Uh-huh. It's only yeah, I'm really grateful for your participation for today too. Okay, yeah, that is our second great speaker for today. And now, last but not least, I will also invite our last speaker for today, Miss Jean Enriquez, the Executive Director of CATWAP Philippines. Hello, Miss Jean.
Hi, Nadine. Thanks to you and also our comrades from the Asia Alliance Against Torture, especially our sisters from the Philippines like Adele, who facilitated the invitation. And we have been advocating that violence against women be actually considered as torture by private actors. So it's a very important part of the advocacy against torture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much also. So maybe to start off, we have been maybe, no, the speakers have elaborated a little bit about their opening speech for today's topic. So I can't wait and I'm so excited and expect to see more fruitful discussion for today's topic. Okay, so I think I'll just jump into our main discussion for today. So, violence against women in Asia. I think first things first, my question and also, yeah, my question will be, how do speakers here, Miss Susan, Miss Nisha, and also Miss Jean, view this issue? Since that I have actually mentioned before that violence against women cases increases during the pandemic, and the number increases more than 50% than we actually see in the reports, maybe from the news and etc. So let it be domestic abuse, domestic violence, violence against the human rights defenders, sexual assault, and etc. I would like to know how the speakers view this issue. Maybe I could start off from Miss Nisha first, since I also have read before that the violence against women in Malaysia, um, he stated that there are more than 5,000 cases in 2020, but this number greatly increases to over 9,000 in 2021. So can you please tell us your view about this issue and this increasing number? Oh, you're still muted. You're still.
Thank you so much. I did not expect to be the first speaker. So you did catch me by surprise. I actually do have a PowerPoint that I want to share. And is that okay? Because the PowerPoint just actually does talk about some of the statistics that we've been experiencing in the country in terms of domestic violence and sexual harassment. And I will also, in this PowerPoint, share a little bit about the organization that I work in, which is called AWAM. And just let me know, are you able to see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So just good. So I work for a very small organization in Malaysia. We are based very close to the capital of Malaysia called Kuala Lumpur, and our organization is about 36 years old. We're one of the older organizations on women's rights in Malaysia, and it was started by this group of women that you can see in this picture. And you can see from the picture, it's just a bunch of women who got together to decide that they wanted to do something about violence against women in Malaysia, because during that time we did not have very good laws when it came to violence against women. And there was a lot of cases of especially rape that was happening in the country. And of course, eventually over the years, Awam became a registered society, and now we are officially a tax-exempt NGO in Malaysia. So we have something that we do call a helpline that we have called Telinita. And what we do in Awam is that we actually share a lot of information about the statistics of the cases that comes to Awam, and we put this out on social media. So obviously there's a lot here. There's about eight posters here. And not only do we share these statistics, we also try to encourage people to call us. We try to encourage women who are in trouble, women who are experiencing gender-based violence, to call us. And so we keep putting out our numbers. And one of the things that we noticed, and I don't know, maybe Miss Susan and Miss Jean, if you maybe have the same kind of experience, is when you actually start talking more about the fact that help is available, and when you talk more about your hotlines, that you tend to get more people calling. And that's what we noticed a lot with our domestic violence and sexual harassment survivors. And I think it's also indicative of the mental health situation of survivors, because when they are gender-based violence survivors, their vulnerability levels go up really high, their mental health levels go down really low, and they find it very difficult to think about getting help. So sometimes it's really good to push that out to them. And as you can see, we also put this out on various languages. We advocate for policy change. We do a lot of public education, public education and trainings. We've been doing a lot more online, as I think most of you have been doing since the pandemic. And as I mentioned earlier on, we do a lot of counseling. We also provide legal information services via our Telenita hotline. And you can see in the picture here where there's a lady in orange escorting another lady to the police station. So we also provide those kind of services. We do a lot of stakeholder engagement and support, and you can see that we try to really break out of like the English speaking community. We go to people who speak local languages. We even have this picture here where we try to reach out to people who read and write in Jawi, which is like a Islamic, which is sort of like a Islamic version of the Malay language in Malaysia. We also have occasionally tried our best to support marginalized communities, because gender-based violence is also very high in marginalized communities, and not especially in those that are not fully able-bodied. And this is something that not many people really pay attention to. Not because they don't want to, because it's already such a lot of work to work with just able-bodied women. We also have started working on ad hoc responses with COVID-19, and we usually don't provide food aid, because the things that the main crux of our work is providing services and counseling and legal information to women, to gender-based violence survivors. But because of COVID-19, and because we're quite a well-established non-governmental organization in Malaysia, a lot of people actually also approached us for food. So that was something that we needed to do, because we couldn't say no, right? So we've also started giving people food. So just to talk about how common is domestic violence in the country. And you mentioned it earlier. You said that we had an increase in our cases. So you stole my line. But actually, yes, you can actually see, right? In March 2020 to December 2020, it's in 10 months last year, we had 4,000 over cases. And please bear in mind that these are reported cases. Non-reported cases will probably add on to that number significantly. And then you can see just in 8 months, we've already gone above the 4,110 cases last year. Just in a shorter period of time, we're seeing more cases. And these are cases that are reported to our government helpline. So the government also has a helpline that they call Talian Kasih, which they have been really sharing with the Malaysian women to actually use to call for support. And they've been doing quite a lot of work in that aspect in the last year, especially. In Awam itself, in 2020, we had 81 cases of domestic violence, domestic violence survivors that came to Awam. So again, I would like to reiterate that we are quite a small organization, and in our counseling and legal information department, at that point in 2020, we only had one person who was in charge, and we had 2 or 3 counselors who would support us, and we also had 2 or 3 legal pupils who would support us as well. When the pandemic happened, a lot of the legal pupils were not allowed by the Bar Council to come to Awam. So actually the Awam staff had to provide service when they could, and it was quite difficult for us because we were all not allowed to go to work, and it was really a very difficult time, because as everybody knows, it was during the pandemic that domestic violence cases really shot up, right? And it was actually known, gender-based violence became known as the shadow pandemic, and this was all around the world, and Malaysia was no exception. Seriously, it was no exception. And so we saw a really sharp rise. And then it went down a little bit, but then it continued to rise again. And what we are seeing now is that even in 2021, the cases are now more than double, and it hasn't even been a year. And although we are small, this is representative of what's going on in all the other NGOs that are dealing with gender-based violence cases, especially domestic violence. It's just merely a model of literally what's going on with every other NGO that deals with gender-based violence cases. And as you can see, this is also supplemented by what the government also has said in terms of the calls that they are getting in 2021 in comparison to 2020. So the cases have exploded. And of course, I think one of the reasons why we also see the numbers exploding is because a lot of NGOs and to a certain extent the governments are starting to pay attention about the fact that domestic violence is an issue that really needs to be dealt with, and it's no longer just a side issue. It's actually a central issue that really needs to be dealt with in society. And therefore, a lot of people are putting out helplines. A lot of people are providing surveys. So we see the numbers coming in, and again, this is of course representative of what's going on the ground. And of course, mainly the genders that come to us, that comes to us for domestic violence are women, but we are also surprisingly starting to see more men coming to us as well. And 16 men came to us as domestic violence survivors this year so far. And this is actually more than we had about 6 men last year. So you can see that the numbers where men are concerned is also increasing. And this is also just showing you how rampant the issue is becoming. The biggest number of people who came to us were within 31 to 40 years old. And you can also see that we also get cases of people who are older. So we get a lot of questions from people asking us whether domestic violence is an issue that happens only among the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, but it actually happens across the board. I always like to tell people domestic violence is very egalitarian. We fight for gender equality, but the issue of domestic violence itself is very egalitarian. It doesn't see race, it doesn't see color, it doesn't see religion, it doesn't see age. It happens to everybody, and it happens mainly to women. We've also seen a rise of sexual harassment cases in 2020. So prior to 2020, Awam used to have maybe 20 cases in a year or less of people coming to Awam for sexual harassment cases. But in 2020, we saw 91 cases. And in 2021, this has increased to 143 cases. So again, you can see that there is a rise in sexual harassment cases. So violence against women, this is just another example of how violence against women is increasing. And the latest, newest thing that's been really becoming an issue, and also has exploded as a result of the pandemic, and as a result of the fact that people could not go out, and there was a lot more online engagement on computers and on the internet. We saw a huge rise in online sexual harassment cases. And online sexual harassment cases really caught us by surprise, because there's not enough really concrete laws in our country. And I don't know, but I hope I hope there are better laws in the other countries in Asia when it comes to online sexual harassment cases, because this is something that we are really finding it a little bit challenging to handle. But it is an issue that is becoming more and more prevalent. And okay, I'm gonna stop my share right now. So basically, that's just going to be my presentation. And I just wanted to just reiterate that whatever that you're saying about the fact that violence against women in Asia is increasing, Malaysia, I can't speak for the other countries, but I can safely say that in Malaysia, it is definitely an issue that is becoming bigger and bigger as the year and the months and the days go by. Thank you.
No, thank you for the perfect presentation and the representation of how Malaysia views violence against women. What I like here is that, sorry, before that, I maybe stole your starting line by stealing the data.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. I was like, she's saying what I'm supposed to say.
Yeah. Because I needed data to start my maybe my conversation to members, right? So, okay, what I like here is that first things first, you not only elaborate or not only show the data of violence against women as the year, month, week, and day gone by, but you also elaborate that there is a subsequent number between women and men. And the data proves here strictly proves here that the number of violence against women is a lot larger than the violence against men. Maybe if that is a good title for it. Yeah, because there are several maybe debates that violence doesn't just go against women, but it also goes against maybe boys or men, because there are several domestic violences against boys, right, in their own respective homes. But the case here is that violence against women varies more than the violence against men. So I am very thankful for you to highlight and spotlight the data here, just to show that not only in Indonesia, since we have also several cases of the increasing number against violence against women, but also in Malaysia, maybe more than 50%, if I'm not mistaken, the huge margin number for it.
Yes, definitely more than 50%. Definitely, easily more than 50%. Yes, for sure. And it's quite unfortunate that although the problem is increasing, we don't really see the solutions to the problem increasing at the same pace. So that is very, very frustrating for us. And I'm really, really curious to hear how it's happening in the other countries as well. And to see whether the problems that we have are similar. I suspect it is. And to see how it is being handled by Susan and Jean in their respective countries as well.
Okay. Yeah. Again, thank you very much for this starting point for our today's webinar. I think I would just jump into our second speaker first, just to elaborate how things are going for the case in. Maybe I would go for Miss John because she's been smiling. So yeah, you go on, Miss John.
Okay, thank
Please tell me.
It's actually pronounced Jean.
Oh, Jean.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So let me also share a PowerPoint.
Sure.
A few slides. I think it would create greater impact to be able to show the numbers visually. So, sorry. There are 2 slides that I have. Apologies. I'm taking a few seconds just to determine which of the 2 PowerPoints.
Sure. Take your time. Take all the time you need, Miss Jean.
Okay, thanks.
Not a problem.
So,
okay.
As I mentioned, I'll be talking not only about domestic violence, but also rape, some cases of sexual harassment, and also trafficking for sexual exploitation. So it's important to frame our discussion on violence against women as taking many forms. It could be any act of gender-based violence according to the United Nations Declaration and Vow that was finalized in 1993, that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. So before the pandemic, there's a relatively higher reporting. This is to the police. We call the lockdown the enhanced community quarantine, so that's ECQ. But you can see a significant decrease in reporting when there were lockdowns. So that also presented a huge problem for survivors of all forms of violence. Rape, violence against women is how the local law refers to domestic violence, trafficking, sexual harassment. According to hospitals, these are the women and children protection units in hospitals. We have at least 23 across the country. There's also significant decrease in reporting. So that became very alarming for us. This was between March and April of 2020, from 627 to 108 of all forms, again, of violence. In June, it increased a little bit. I'm going to talk later about what the interventions are. I understand that's your second question about what the government did. So there's a bit of intervention and also the civil society organizations. And that could have affected the slight decrease in reporting. So now we are seeing a total of 4,260 cases. 88% of these are violence in intimate relationship or domestic violence. But this still doesn't show significant increase. And that's still very alarming to us. And we believe that the prolonged quarantine also contributed to limitations. And I'm going to detail the limitations in reporting in a little bit. Now, we have also community level structures of governance, and that's called barangay. So that's very similar for many countries in Asia. I mean the language, no? So now they are recording by June 2021, 18,222. So there's significant increase in terms of reporting of violence against women victims. So for our organization, we were able to document just in the last 4 months a significant increase in online trafficking. So we have documented 503 cases of sex trafficking from June 2021 to present. All of these are women and children, and that also answers your debate, Nadine, about men and women being victims. So clearly here in our records, these are all women, and the children are all girl children. 70% of them are belonging to who are considered as young people by the United Nations, 15 to 24. Oh, sorry, some of the words are in Filipino. It's important to note that of this number, 80% are 18 and older. The reason why I am emphasizing this, because a lot of protection are now directed towards children only, as if women or adult women are not harmed by violence. So it's important to note that 80% of those reporting to us seeking for assistance because they were harmed by online abuse, particularly online trafficking for sexual exploitation, are 80% of the number. And most of them were sexually abused already as children, which makes them vulnerable to sexual exploitation, particularly trafficking for sexual exploitation. And the majority of them are homeless or among the rural or urban poor. Now, these are the platforms that were used in exploiting the women online. TikTok, Facebook, some are directly contacted via cell phone, and there's also, that's pimping via Tinder and other applications. So the common modes of trafficking would be the direct enticement or hiring, taking advantage of the hunger during the pandemic. And they're also using the term work to be able to recruit the women towards sexual exploitation, which becomes very dangerous. And these have been the challenges. The authorities at the village level has been delaying the release of protection orders. So we have a local law that's supposed to be very strong because it provides for the release of protection orders for the victims and against the perpetrators or the offenders. The police or the Philippine National Police Women's Desks, during the lockdown, the first action to the post-enhanced community quarantine, even in cases of rape. There's also the inability of victims to file complaints with the public prosecutor's office because there's no one in these public offices to respond to. And there's a difficulty of survivors in obtaining medical legal examination. Obviously, there are transportation mobility constraints and also no transportation for survivors fleeing their abusive partners. So there's a huge lack of awareness at the community level of local authorities who are mandated by the law to respond to the cases. There's lack of gender sensitivity, rights-based and survivor-centered approach to victims and cases of all forms of violence. And there's continuing stigmatization of the victim by the public and also the officials or public official statements in the Philippines encouraging violence. As we know, currently, we have a very oppressive authoritarian government, and the Philippine president has been issuing statements against women, and such misogynistic statements of the Philippine president encourage violence against women. And there's also the lack of economic alternatives for victims of violence. So I won't be giving the specific cases anymore, but just in case, we get into details of cases of sex trafficking, we have a lot of case studies, but I'll stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Jean. Okay, Miss Jean. Okay, yeah. Another fun fact that I maybe got from your presentation is that the misogynistic characteristic from the president and also from other agents. So this is a very good point to show that not only the citizens who are the main perpetrators to this inhuman act, but also the higher ups who are responsible to maybe just take care of the perpetrators, but they actually have the same idealistic as them. So this is one of the maybe concrete perspective that we should take home as a homework, because again, not only the perpetrators we have to look eye on, but also the the lawmakers, the policymakers who are also responsible to the increasing number. So this is a very interesting point from Ms. Jean. Thank you very much. Okay, so next but not least, we have Miss Susan who was sipping her tea. Okay, please.
Thank you so much once again for this opportunity. Let me also introduce about my organization also, and me also maybe.
Sure
It will be
thing.
good also. My organization is Nagarika Awaz. It's a citizen's voice. It's a peace building organization, and we especially work with the women who were affected by armed conflict, which was happened in Nepal during 1996 to 2006. And especially we work with the women who lost their husbands, whose husband had disappeared, who faced conflict-related sexual violence. And I also did my PhD on that topic. You know, I tried to explore the perspective of justice and dignity through the perspective of women who faced conflict-related sexual violence. You know, so that is who I am and what my organization is. Just a brief introduction about my organization. And I don't have to talk about the violence. I don't have to define violence now because our previous friends, they have already defined what violence is. You also define it. And also from our other friends, they also define what is violence against women. For me, you know, the violence always is done by power holder to powerless with force and with coercion. That what we always agree, being a woman, you know. So, and with regards to the status of, you know, violence in the time of COVID, obviously what our friends have been sharing, that in Nepal also, it is also alarming, it is also increasing. Actually, I have taken the reference from one of the organization called OREC. They have just, you know, published their book, which is called Unbasi. They every year they used to, you know, publish this book as advocacy tools, where it has mentioned that this year they have documented 1,772 cases of gender-based violence, and among them, almost 63% of the violence are the domestic violence, and it is done by their intimate partners, the husbands. It is the data of July 20 to June 2021. And 51%, and also 63% was the domestic violence, but 51% from their intimate partners, 19% are from their other neighbors or, you know, their relatives, and also 15% women also face social kind of violence in the, you know, name of, you know, some time of traditions, culture, that was also happening. And also 11% experienced rape during this pandemic period, and also 0.8% were killed after committing rape, and 4% also face sexual violence. With regards to sexual violence, you know, expressing a kind of misogynist languages, you know, the language or some kind of act, it falls into this criteria. And 0.7% are, you know, forced to commit suicide. This kind of scenario here exists in Nepal actually. And why it is happening, you know, I don't have that kind of presentation, but I'll share about my experiences. Why it is happening is that the violence is normalized in Nepal, you know. There is a kind of the framework of normative violence is still there. And the women who are beaten by their husband or having that kind of violence is taken as normal. And such violence are always been, done by, especially by men in our patriarchal country. And also, we are in a post-conflict period still. Nepal is in the post-conflict period. Now we are facing the impact of COVID. The security mechanisms are very much weakened. Impunity is very high. And the government effort is only been, it has been taking as effort to managing the superficial effect of the pandemic or the superficial effect of the conflict, but they never have done the thorough analysis onto the structural violence. Because gender inequality, what we always say, is the starting point for the violence. And that has been never been done by our state structures. There is no analysis of gender, power, and violence. Gender-based violence was exist in the time of pre-conflict, in the time of, let's say, so-called peacetime, and also in the post-conflict period, and also in the time of conflict. Or in the time of pandemic. That means we fail to analyze the continuum of the gender, power, and violence. Until and unless we don't do that, until and unless we don't dig out the structural causes of the violence, and until and unless we do not shift the paradigm, with regards to understanding of the direct violence, structural violence, and also the cultural violence, because we always see direct violence visible. We don't see the cultural and a kind of structural violence. It is really invisible. And in Nepal, we are missing out to dig out this kind of notion in this transition period and in the time of violence also. And also, still, there are so many cases of conflict related violence is there. The torture what women faced during the time of armed conflict, they are not even categorized as conflict affected women. So there is a gap of seeing those kind of cases from gender lens. So that kind of sensitivity is also not there. And we also see that there is always a kind of scenario where this kind of violence is always politicized, or the crime is always been politicization, and the perpetrator are kind of getting rid from the misdeed what they did to the women. And also, it is very interesting to hear from the friends from Philippines or from Malaysia that there are many men are also facing such kind of violence. As I mentioned that, the power holder always, done this kind of violence to the powerless. And in Nepal, we have just recently heard that in one of the, jail, one of the homosexual has been experienced violence by the security personnel. So it is a very larger continuum, why we are having this kind of experience in such kind of violence. So until and unless we don't analyze the continuum of gender, power, and violence, and until and unless we don't dig out the structural issues of the violence, we will not be going to, kind of the peace where we always feel that everybody wants to live in a notion of everyday peace. But now the women are, experience everyday violence in their life. Thank you.
Wow. From what I have heard so far, not only it is heartbreaking, but it is sometimes creates a hopeless vibe to it. Since Miss Susan's here has stated before that it all started. The pinpoint of it is the structural violence, just the same as Miss Jean has mentioned before. It is politicized. It is not only there is a case of violence against women in the rural area of A, B, C, and etc. But even in the higher ups, again, it is politicized for the case of violence against women to happen. And Ms. Susan here has stated before that we have to analyze the agenda power of violence in order to see through maybe a little bit of a loophole on how do we get to it. How do we create a solution to it, but one by one, just to see on which agenda should we take part in order to create a solution to this issue. And another thing that is sad to me is that when Miss Susan also stated that it is normalized, since I for myself, and I am 100% sure for other speakers to have this perspective, is that violence is never been has never been and it will never be normalized, since it is an action to create maybe a hurtful experience and a traumatizing experience to people. So it is also questionable on how the people, maybe not only in Nepal but also several countries in Asia, as I read before, sees that through this patriarchal patriarchal environment, violence against women is just normalized. This makes my blood boil, actually. So yeah, okay, maybe of course, thank you very much, Miss Susan, for this very detailed elaboration. And this also continues on to our second point. But before, I would like to thank also the speakers, that it is actually refreshing to see the speakers have elaborated not only to just introduce their CSOs, but also they have introduced and elaborate what have they done so far towards the women who had been through the cases. So thank you very much for the contribution of your CSOs. But of course, we need to head on to our next question on how the government sees this, and also how and what has been done by the government so far. I see speakers smiling towards this question, because this is not only maybe the most anticipated question, but this is also a tricky on what really has been done to solve the issue. Maybe I could just roll the dice again, and I could start with Miss Jean. Please do, Miss Jean.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just looking at the slides that I'm going to show. Earlier, I was talking about the obstacles in reporting to the government. And part of that, in fact, is the fact that the government are perpetrators also. Not only the president, as I was saying earlier, does he encourage violence against women, but he also flaunts his acts of violence against their domestic worker, etc. So I just want to show now this a few case studies wherein the police are in fact perpetrators of sexual exploitation. So before the lockdown, related to the COVID, there was the case of this young woman, age 19. So Casey was studying and she's being sponsored, meaning she's being used as a sexual slave by a Congress employee, and she was introduced to him by a pimp. And that's in exchange for sponsoring her studies. So when the lockdown started, she was abandoned by this public employee, and then she was victimized by online sexual exploitation. She was being picked up from her home by a vehicle with a red plate, and that means that person is a government official. So she was being brought to a condominium in Quezon City by a police together with her friends Nika and Angela from April to June of 2020. The three, as a result, contracted COVID-19, and Casey died in November 2020, while the two others recovered. So our organization channeled food through a survivors group in the locality, which is a nearby province. They were also provided cash support, and we also provided medical assistance to the surviving girls. And they are now studying with the support of our survivors group. We also reported this to the police. However, they are very fearful for their lives because the perpetrators are police officers. Because also the pandemic response of the government is very militarized, and there are men in uniform guarding borders in different parts of the Philippines. They are also taking advantage of it. So Amelia and Carol were brought across the border of a province by the police, and they were sexually used in the barracks. So we had to, again, provide intervention, of course, through immediate assistance, not only food, but also counseling, medical assistance. But because of fear from the police, the survivors group had to help them transfer to a different province. So they didn't want to file a case against the police, but we had to do psychosocial intervention. There was also the case of another woman who was approached by the police in the market, and because of hunger, she accepted the offer of just 150 pesos and the loaf of bread. But that police officer continued to abuse her. Even this police officer has been abusing her even before the pandemic. But the police kept coming back to her until after the pandemic. So we provided assistance as well to her. And then this is the fourth case, the last case I'll be showing to you, who was also being picked up or fetched by the police officer and being brought back to her house in exchange for passing across the border. Eventually, she became pregnant because of what's being done to her by the police. So what we have seen in these cases of trafficking for prostitution, the pandemic did not stop the male buyers' entitlement over the women's bodies. The buyers are those privileged with mobility who are able to move around. And so they're picking up the women and bringing them back to the houses, even as the people in general are prohibited from moving around. So they're the only ones who are able to move and are able to buy, quote unquote, commodify the women. So the hunger worsened the women's vulnerability. The problem is that the assistance by the government to women who have been sexually exploited is not really long-term. And there's also the need to address the fear of the women to file cases against the men in uniform. So this is a Department of Interior and Local Government advisory in relation to domestic violence. So they have more interventions in relation to other forms of violence, such as domestic violence, but not so much in relation to trafficking for sexual exploitation. They issued an advisory to say that the barangay violence against women desk should be functional. So that's what they did to ensure that services continue even during the pandemic. However, it's up to us, that's myself now in the photo, who had to continue the training of local governments to ensure that they also sustain the responses to cases that are being brought to them. So this is me training a sister from a health department in a faraway island of Mindanao. Because we cannot go there to sustain our trainings, we had to do that using cell phones. So that's how difficult the trainings became before the advent of Zoom. And then we produced the digital modules for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao on rights-based responses to violence against women. To make the trainings easier, we had to produce these digital modules. So I'm shifting towards what the CSO are in fact doing to reinforce the lack in what the government has been doing. So invoking that advisory from the government, we had to produce posters and also stickers on alcohol so that our partner leaders in the communities can go around and inform the women that they can still and they should still use the services that should be available from the government. And we also produce this mobile application. We call it the Her Voice mobile application for reporting of all forms of violence against women, including trafficking. So this is a mobile application where victim survivors can fill up the form online, and it will reach the local government service providers. So before we distributed this mobile application, we had to train again the local governments to ensure that they have a survivor-centered response. And it also sends alerts to the people, to the public in general. We also distributed these numbers for reporting, for violence against women and children, for rape, for trafficking and prostitution, sexual harassment, and also the Commission on Human Rights online portal for reporting. And we also disseminated numbers for e-lawyering. So most of the services shifted online. And okay, it's not moving now. So I guess I'll stop here and I'll come back when you ask us about what should be the ideal interventions. But initially, that's how we're bridging the gaps between government response and also the need of the survivors. Thank you so much. Nadine, if you can stop my share because I think my laptop hung and I could not move anything right now.
Okay,
Thank
sure,
you.
sure, sure, sure. Allow me to stop share.
Yes, please.
Okay, sure.
Thank
It's
you.
been done now. Okay, yeah. Maybe I would like to ask one question regarding the hotline. Of course, in every single issues, whether it will be the violence against women and other issues that is related to the society, the safety of the society, there is what we call a hotline, or maybe what you have called before also the application, so that women or other entities could just contact their respective organization sooner. But I would like to ask that are the hotlines detailed by your presentation is effective enough to solve the issue? Are they fast enough to respond? Or yeah, maybe that's just my question for now.
Yeah. The only ones that we are posting are the hotlines that we have proven to be working. We're not popularizing hotlines that are not working. So we test first if these hotlines are working, if they are using gender responsive, rights based, and survivor centered care or approach for victim survivors of violence. So those are the ones that we have proven to be working well because we had to refer victims also to the government because they are the ones who have the resources, who are mandated by the law we ourselves feminists pushed for. So we have to make them work because if we will rely solely on the resources of civil society organizations, we can only help enough, but not a lot, as much as we can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, it is very safe to hear that all the hotlines are working as fast and as soon as possible, since I believe that cases such as violence against women happens every day. So there should be maybe at least 100 phone calls, or maybe dozens of phone calls to respond. So it will be worrying if the women who are seeking for help are not maybe responded as soon as possible. Oh, Miss Jean, are you
Just
raising your
very
hand?
quickly, to qualify
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you
yeah.
mentioned. Not
Sure,
all
sure.
hotlines. I'm saying the hotlines that I posted are the ones that are working.
Okay.
I'm not saying all hotlines, but
Okay.
just the ones that we share. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sure thing. I hope that the hotlines that you have shared are as responsive and as soon as possible to respond. A lot of cases happened in the Philippines. Really do hope so. Okay. Thank you very much, Miss Jean, for the elaboration. Maybe we should go next to Miss Susan, since Miss Nisha have started first in the last question. I will give it. I will give it to Miss Susan first. Okay,
No
Miss Susan,
problem.
go on.
No problem. Actually, I will go what has been done by the government first, and then I'll talk about the ideal situation, to prevent the violence.
Yes.
Actually, we do have different, policies and international instrument in place, which is ratified by Nepal. We have a policy on domestic violence law. We also have ratified CEDAW. We also have the National Action Plan. Now it is expired, but it is about United Nations Security Council 1325 and 1820, which also talk about preventing violence against women. We also have gender equality policy. We also endorsed SDG, which mostly the SDG 5, which mostly talk about gender equality, and we aim to reach from 11% to 33% by 2030, and also reducing the gender-based discrimination from 0.49 to 0.05, and also increasing gender empowerment from 0.57 to 0.69. But the pandemic has impacted a lot. We are not reaching, I don't know, I really doubt whether we are going to reach the aim what we have aiming to achieve, which we have mentioned in SDG 5. And we also have the international instrument like human rights, international human rights, and also United Nations economy, social and cultural rights. Our constitution also says, those who commit such kind of physical or psychological violence, this kind of act is punished. So there are lots of, and we also have a justice committee in every ward actually, which is led by women. So these kind of instruments are already is in place. If you look at the South Asian context, Nepal is very much progressive with regards to passing laws, ratifying international instrument, but at the implementation level, we are lagging behind actually. It is because it has always been a kind of transitional period. We faced a conflict, and then we went through post-conflict period, and again we had our constitution assembly election. We are in a state of political establishment, again experiencing earthquake, and again now pandemic. That kind of transition is always there. So the violence against women issues has been always been considered as a structural issues, and that is why also, although there is a policies and law, government are not that much been effective, to addressing in those kind of violence. We used to talk while there is a, in 2020, we also used to talk in our friend circle who are working on this area. Now the justice system is also been in a state of lockdown. That kind of scenario is there in Nepal, and the ideal situation to prevent this kind of violences, what I always believe, that it is always necessary to implement the existing law. If we have to amend amend the this kind of law, we have to do that, or bringing the new laws, so that this kind of issues or the problems has to be dealt with the fast track services and through the justice system. And there should be a gender centric law, and maybe the gender centric friendly structures also has to be put in place, and it has to be considered as political agenda, not going beyond, like the notion that it is only the women's issues. It has to be taken as a political agenda. And it is also very necessary. Nepal doesn't have that kind of national data on violence, so it is also necessary to collect the national data on violence, so that the proper implementation plan can be formulated. And another aspect is safe spaces for women is always been necessary. Although government has put the safe spaces in the name of OCMC in every district, but in the time of pandemic, it was not that much functioning because of the resources and everything. And there must be a kind of reintegration packages that our friends has also mentioned, that due to those kind of violence, women has to suffer a lot in terms of psychological aspect, physical aspect, economic aspect, because in South Asian countries, most of the breadwinner of the our houses are the men. And if she experience such kind of violence, and if she report those kind of violence, she always have a fear, how can she survive her lives. So it is very necessary to put extra effort how women can live the dignified life. Until and unless we do this kind of initiative, we can't dream for the violence against free society. That's what I always believe. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the conclusion from Miss Susan is that woman has to have a larger access, maybe, to participate in political actions and etc.
One thing, may I add?
Yeah, sure, sure.
The friend Jean from Philippines, what she was sharing, the misogynist languages has been expressed by her, by the president of Philippines. And the similar situation in Nepal we also feel, in our parliament also, our most of the male leaders, it is dominated by the male leaders. They also express the misogynist languages for the women parliamentarian. It is not about the marginalized community, until and unless we don't, put our effort to shift the mind set of the parliamentarian or the policymaker with regards to attitude, behavior in the given context, the violence will always be there at the policy level, and also at the grassroots level. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Whoa, no, it's okay. That was a very hot tea we were about to sip at the moment. So, yeah, maybe I was about to ask if what are the loopholes? I mean, I heard that Nepal has
Did she freeze?
Yes.
Okay.
It seems like that. She's disappeared.
Oh, has she? Okay, she's still on my screen.
Yeah, she's in the screen, but her we are
Completely,
not, she's not
yeah.
audible. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not at all.
Good that we meet at least in this online platform.
Yeah, I'm really amazed at some of the issues that are being faced in the other countries.
Yeah.
It's I mean, but at the very basic level, it's all the same. It's all about patriarchy. It's all about women as second-class citizens. Mm-hmm. It's all about inadequate laws. It's all about authorities or police not being gender sensitive. I think we all share that same issues, but at various different levels in our cases when we deal with gender-based violence survivors.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you back?
Hello, I'm back for more. Wow, yeah, it's raining at the moment, so I guess that kind of explains the signal and etc. Okay, yeah. Moving on again to my question. I was actually about to ask Miss Susan if there is a certain loophole that can be, provided by the women organizations to maybe engage the male misogynist to give solution to that certain convention, because I've heard before that Nepal has ratified a lot of international conventions to prevent the violence against women. But in reality, even the higher ups are still, prohibiting or maybe being rebellious to the convention that I have ratified. So I was just asking if there is a certain loophole that maybe the female organizations, the women organizations can maybe look into, participate into, so that the misogynist cases can be decreased, probably, Miss Susan?
That what I always feel, that is that I again would like to, share my previous sharing, the loopholes I always say, we are just going into a kind of, the our thought or our notion, what we are trying to dig out, we are only going into a kind of policy level thing only, the policies, the infrastructures. I always feel like we are in a state of liberal peace where, a kind of infrastructures with regards to policies, it has been formulated. But again, I reiterate, we haven't dig out the issues of the structural violence where we need to engage, those power holders who are enjoying this power, who are getting the dividend of peace and, enjoying their power in the parliament. We also need to have a deeper level dialogues, by different kind of circles, let's say, and bringing out those kind of structural violence together with them, so that we can also have a kind of space where we can contribute to change their, attitude, behavior in the given context. Until and unless we don't do that, we are just advocating on the issues of violence against women. And if we don't try to shift those notions about the attitude and behavior, it will never happen, effectively. That what we have been assuming. That I always see the loopholes.
That is a very brave statement because that is what I have been thinking so far. Why not increase the total percentage of women given access to political systems, right?
Yes.
There's no wrong to that at all.
Yes.
But here's that Miss Susan stated, also Miss Nisha and also Miss Jean stated that the structure here, the pinpoint here, the number one position here have stated that the number percentage should be given more to men, ironically. so it is still questionable for us to just, can women just seek in more to, maybe be more of the policymakers to make a greater change for this issue. I will not talk maybe more about this because Miss Jean is willing to is willing to participate in this debate. Please do, Miss Jean.
I have 2 points. I think it's important to mention that seeking accountability of government officials is very important, even if they have immunity, such as the president. Before President Duterte won, we filed a case against him using the Magna Carta of women because you were asking for loopholes in the law. In fact, these are strong points in the law that we can sue public officials. But we know now that the president is taking advantage of that immunity that he has. But we have the International Criminal Court where he is also being charged now because of the extrajudicial killings. And related to that would be the rape of women because of that policy of a militarized war against drugs. That's basically a war against the poor. So seeking accountability is one thing in terms of challenging structures of power. But I think what's also underestimated is really challenging the culture of rape itself or the culture of violence against women, which is basically challenging patriarchal ideas. That this, again, as our sister said, that it should not in fact be normalized and be taken as something that is normal or natural. But it's in fact born out of a very intense power inequality that manifests in relationships, in very glaring abuse of privileges by perpetrators that are mostly men. Thank you.
Okay, another strong point. And Miss Jean here has also mentioned, again, reminding us that partners are not just a partner to women, but they can be also an alarming, maybe character to keep an eye on because I forgot that in Philippines or Malaysia, in Nepal, the highest number of the violence against women is done by intimate partner. Was it from Philippines, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah. Okay. I always wondered, since I'm still like 22, I still wondered that if I have a partner, should I just stamp on his face, I gotta keep an eye on you because you're one of the perpetrators, because that is how just how high the number of violence against women is, from all basic of ages, from all characteristics of women, from all categories of women. So should we just stamp a lot of warnings to men that, yo, I should be careful to you because you're maybe a perpetrator, I don't know. But of course not, because again, we're working side by side by them. But again, the case just tell us all. So it is actually an interesting point for Miss Jean has mentioned. Not only the government, also Miss Susan not only mentioned, it is not only the government but also the police officer and etc. So I would like to hear more from Miss Nisha. Maybe Miss Nisha has another perspective. Go on, Miss Nisha.
I don't think my perspective is going to be different because I was just talking to Susan. I got a big heart from Jean. I was just talking to Susan when you froze because we were talking about the fact how at the basic level we all have the same issues. But you talked about authority figures, and I am seriously appalled that somebody at such a high level in the Philippines can do this, because it has to start from the top, just like Susan said. It's got to be policy, and then it's also got to be something that comes from the ground level, right? But in Malaysia, we have a tendency to really look at our politicians, our police as real figures of authority. So there's always this sense of fear and sense of awe, and it's hard to see to actually. With many people, when the politicians sexually harass somebody, or when the politician is accused of rape, it's very hard to actually get that process of justice running for them, because they are figures of authority, and they have that sort of, even though that immunity is not written down in law, it's sort of like that cultural issue where immunity is there. And I can see you nodding, Susan, because I'm assuming that this is the same thing, and that is something that we really need to break through. And I think in Asian culture, that's what we have, right? You cannot really say too much to the top person, especially when they're doing something that's really wrong, which is ironic, because that's actually the best time for you to actually start questioning the roles of authority. In Malaysia, we also have a lot of issues with police insensitivity, with the lack of gender sensitivity, the lack of understanding about gender equality. And that actually provides, is a huge challenge for survivors of gender-based violence to actually make official reports. They just do not want to go to the police, and or when they go to the police, they have such a bad experience that they drop their reports, or they pull back their reports. And this is something that leads to an issue that I think Susan mentioned. In Nepal, you don't have national data, you don't have national statistics, right? Yeah, so when you don't make a form, we always encourage in Awam, we always encourage our survivors, our clients to go make reports. And a lot of them are really scared. So we try to either get somebody to accompany them, or we get a social worker to accompany them, because this is the only way we're going to get national statistics and national data when they actually make an official report. But it's really interesting to see that Jean actually gets these police, the data that she provided was really amazing. And, I really wish one day, and I hope that's not too far off in the future, that we can also do that in Malaysia. I think with Nepal, it's going to take a long time, but I don't mean any offense, but I think it's going to take a long time. But in Malaysia, I think there's some slight light at the end of the tunnel, because the Ministry of Women, and so in Malaysia, the Ministry of Women really is the ministry that handles gender-based violence. And that in itself is already a problem, because why should it be the Ministry of Women who is in charge of gender-based violence, right? It should be the ministry that's in charge of authorities. It should be the Attorney General's chambers that is in charge of legislation, and it should be the Ministry of Women. So it needs to be like a whole holistic group of people working together to ensure that gender-based violence against women is actually reduced. And so the light at the end of the tunnel that I'm talking about is that the Ministry of Women recently, in the past few months, has actually started to speak to all the CSOs who are dealing with domestic violence, also with the police, also with the welfare authorities, and also with various other stakeholders to all come together. And we're actually devising a database together. And once we devise this database together with what necessary information and data that we need to put inside, we're all going to actually share our data in that database. And that means we actually can get, for the first time, national statistics on domestic violence. And that is a huge, huge, huge win. So they've started having meetings. Just devising the database is already a problem, because everybody has all their different ideas, right? But it's such a great start. And I really see it as something that is a big light at the end of the tunnel. And I don't know if you all know this, but I think Malaysia was the first country to actually have domestic violence legislation in Asia, if I'm not mistaken. So for us, it's like, is everybody frozen? No, right? Susan, you're there, right? I can see your face. Okay, no. Okay. For a minute there, everybody kind of disappeared. So I think we're the first to have domestic violence legislation. Am I right? I think ours was in 1994, 1996. So it's really great that we're leading the way. We led the way in that sense, but we still have a lot of obviously a lot of loopholes, right, in our legislation. But the other thing that we also have legislation for that we have an issue with, and I think this also sort of ties into what Susan said about them needing a reintegration package. We also have challenges where survivors just do not have money for to get justice. They can't pay the legal fees. And although we are an NGO, we provide them counseling, we provide them information so that they know which lawyers to go to, they know how to talk to the lawyers. But at the end of the day, we cannot actually provide that legal advice. We cannot actually take them to court and help them at court. So that should actually come from the government. I seriously think that the government should actually provide a very specific fund in the budgets every year just to support survivors of gender-based violence. And this year in Malaysia, again, we had a slight win in the sense that the government actually provided a budget for us to get extra police officers who are very much, who are specifically going to deal with issues of sexual crimes, which is great. You know, so when we get more police officers, it also means that the cases can happen. They can investigate the cases faster. And these are police officers that are very specific. We call them the D11 unit. So they're very specific with sexual crimes. And that actually means that they understand the issue of sexual crimes. So it's easier for them to understand the trauma of the survivor, and they can really support the survivor along the way. They have the right equipment in the police station. They take the survivor to a safe room so the survivor can talk with a woman police officer if she needs to. They provide a counseling session, counselors for free, and the survivors can go to the counselors at any time. So there are some good things that are happening. It's just that it's just not enough. It's just not enough. Because, we have, of course, we also have challenges. I remember I spoke to a police officer asking them to have more, trained female police officers in every police station in the country. And she came back to me and she said, why do we need to have it in the small towns? It's such a waste when there are no cases of domestic violence or no cases of gender-based violence. And I'm like, it's because there's nobody in the police station. That's why you don't get the report. I mean, who are you to say that it's not happening just because it doesn't happen in front of your face, right? And so I really liked what Jean said when she said that you train the local government officials in all the small towns, right? Because the small towns, even in Malaysia, the small towns are the ones that are suffering the most. So this is not my NGO, but I speak about another NGO that is based in Sabah, and Sabah is on the east side of Malaysia. And I think people in Indonesia recognize Sabah. Sabah is on the east side of Malaysia. And in Sabah, there is a lot of small towns, very, very tiny towns. I wouldn't even call them towns. They're villages. They're tiny villages. And domestic violence is so normalized there. It's like part of the, the husband's breaking the wife's arm. It's like so normalized. But the NGO is trying to help them. So they're trying to tell them, this is not something that's normal. This is not what a marriage is all about. So but the issue here is when you actually manage to kind of change the mindset of the community, especially the women, and then the women's like, okay, I'm ready to go make a police report. The police station is 3 days away. You have to walk because there's no way that you can get to the police station. And they're very poor. They don't have cars. I don't know even if they have motorbikes. So at the end of the day, that whole process is completely lost when they can't even go and act. Maybe the police officers are super nice and super fantastic and super supportive. But if you stay 3 days away and you have to walk and you've already been beaten by your husband, do you want to walk another 3 days just to get to the police station? That's ridiculous. So the interventions here, I mean, it's really nice that we have in Malaysia. I really have to applaud the moves that we're making, even though they're very tiny, they're baby steps. But the intervention really needs to be very, very holistic. And it's not something that's going to take 1 year or 2 years. It really needs to be a very strategic, systematic intervention that will maybe take 5 or 10 years, because it's just, you're fighting against an entire culture of patriarchy in so many levels. And then going back to the fact that, the women are not aware of their rights, right? That's also an issue with us. We also we also see a lot of women not really understanding what their legal rights are. So in the past 3 months, we've had 45 survivors of domestic violence come to Awam in the past, just only 3 months ago. So I think it would have been September, August, and July. So July, August, September. And we had 45 survivors, and 29 of those survivors had no ideas about their legal rights, or they were unsure. So that also makes it very difficult for women to actually be able to understand what is normalized and what is right and what is wrong. And when you're not aware of your legal rights, you don't know who to go to for help. You don't know whether what's happening to you is even right or wrong, right? And so even I liked what Jean said, where she you put the numbers on the alcohol bottle. At first, when you said alcohol, I thought, wow, you give them alcohol for them to drink? And I said, wow, that's quite interesting. But then I realized it's alcohol to wash your hands, right? See, I'm obviously no longer in pandemic mode. I've gone out of pandemic mode. But I thought that was such a brilliant idea. And it's so simple. It's so simple. And everybody wants those alcohol bottles, not just the poor people, right? Everybody in all levels of community will always welcome a free bottle to clean your hands. And so I think that's something that we're definitely going to take from you, that idea, and we're definitely going to suggest it, because at the end of the day, it's about spreading this awareness so everybody gets to understand that, you can reach out for help, and what's happening to you is not right, and there are people who can support you. I want to tell you, so I work in an office, again, like I said, it's in the middle of town, but I work in an office that's actually a house. And a lot of people go by during the day because we're near a train station, but in the night it gets really quiet. And there was one night, just last week, there was 3 of us in the office, and it was really, really quiet outside. And we were all getting ready to go home, and suddenly the doorbell rings. And there's this, and my accounts manager and my program officer opens the door, and there's these 3 people, and they were here. They were there to look for a woman who had run away from their house. Okay, and the woman had been they've been trying to get in touch with her, and she had ran away from her husband, and her husband was actually a family member of these 3 people who were in front of our door, and they thought that she had come to us to get help, because she was very clever. She was leading them on a wild goose chase on the phone. So they were going all around town. So by the time they got to us, it was already 8 o'clock. And I didn't see them, but my staff members saw them, and they said that they were scary looking. They were like really scary. They were like really gangster looking. And one of my staff members was already, they were all already ready to fight if anything happens. But as we found out what was going on, apparently that she had run away because this guy her husband had beaten her. And of course, I have a staff member who is a survivor of domestic violence herself. So she got really angry, and she started telling them, well, if he beats her, of course she's going to run away, right? Then he's like, oh no, I only slapped her. She only got slapped. And that got her even more angrier. And she was like, of course, a slap is also it's a crime, it's a sin. How can you think that it's a bad thing? And I was just like, oh my God, they're going to come and beat us all up inside this office, And, but thankfully, they managed to tell them, okay, if you need to go to the police, if you really want to get help, because it's quite, we didn't want to tell them, of course, if she comes to us, there's no way we're going to call you, right? So we tried to settle the issue. But that entire family was looking for her, despite the fact that she was beaten by her husband, because they thought that she should come home. It's so crazy, right? It's like, and even the people that I know who are my personal friends, who are survivors of domestic violence, right? And they divorce. They do the right thing, they get a divorce, and it's great. And they're living on their own, or they still live with their kids, and they're in touch with their other family members. Their family members give them so much of grief because they left their husband, because you shouldn't get a divorce. It doesn't look good on our family. People are asking about what. And the lady who told me this, right? Her husband used to beat her black and blue. And the family knew about it. and they still can, it's been years since they've had a divorce, and they can still give her grief about the fact that she's a divorced woman and she left her husband. And there's no consideration about the fact about how unhappy she was, and how, he could have killed her if he wanted to, right? Domestic violence, it's so easy, right? But this whole concept, it's so hard to change. It's a challenge for us, and I think one of the things that we really need to do is to figure out how we can all work together, because I'm getting such great ideas from all of you, and I think it's something that I don't think it's something that we can do on a country level anymore. I think it really needs to be on a regional level. And that also means, providing support to each other, trying to find funding to each other, because we are fighting a really huge monster here. Like, it's really, really huge. Okay, I think I got a little bit too emotional, so I'm going to stop. But thank you for giving me the time.
Miss Nisha for president, right? because her elaboration was so fiery that it got me all caught up by her immense number of cases, since she did not only elaborate one case but also one case to another, so it creates a dominic effect to the cases, which is very interesting. And what I agree to Miss Nisha is that the point of this is not only a matter of a country's problem anymore, and the solution should not only be implemented by countries, but it should be a number of countries, which is why we should create a regional solution to propose and urge and encourage to the government to just hey, maybe you could maybe again increase the number or the percentage of women in the political system, or maybe the parliament, or maybe women for president, I don't know. And maybe we should only not only trying to get the government to ratify what has been written by the International Convention for the Violence Against Women, but also it should be really implemented in many small ways. Maybe like what Miss Jean has done before in her country, to put posters, or maybe make the government to also participate in the campaign and etc. There are many things that I see in the women CSOs that also can be done and supported by the government. But the question is why such simple small acts is not supported. So the answer again leads to misogyny. The answer leads again to patriarchal, and again it leads to structural violence. So it just went on like road. Yeah, I know. I can read Susan's lips. She's just like, yeah, it's true. Okay, yeah, okay. Maybe this is the last question that is the juiciest of them all. So maybe I could start off with Miss Susan, since she hasn't got the chance to be the first one to speak upon this. Yes, the first question, and sorry, the question is, you already know, Miss Susan, what are the ideal preventive actions toward violence against women? Maybe doing regional campaigns or etc. You have any other ideas? Please do.
Actually, I think I have shared about the ideal situation. Yeah. First, being a patriarchal country, Nepal, what I always believe is that our, sexuality or our reproductive health is considered as a prestige issues for the family of women or the community of women. If we are raped, then we are considered as impure. That kind of, understanding has to be sifted first, number one. And there is also the culture of silence is there. Being a woman also, as I mentioned you, that it is a prestige. Our sexuality is considered as prestige issues for the family. If the woman is being raped, that kind of culture also goes to women, and they don't speak because of the stigma attached to this issue. So this kind of stigma also has to be sifted. The notion of the blame to the women has to be sifted. So the other thing that what I have been highlighting in my previous sharing also, that the mindset, a kind of mindset, what we, the Jean also mentioned about the militarized mindset in the time of pandemic, it has to be also shifted. In our peace process, it was mentioned that there will be some kind of intervention has to be put in place to reform the, institutional reform or the security reform is also there. But still, that kind of militarized mindset is also there. So women are always have a fear, to go to such kind of police station where, her experience of violence can be heard by those security personnels. That is another thing. And also, I mentioned that the reintegration packages, the safe spaces, the programs for the deeper level discussion, what I mentioned earlier also, I used to say that as I'm working in peace building organization, that we really conduct peace circles, we used to organize peace circles where we used to invite diverse group of the stakeholders from the family of the women, from the community of the women, from the government, from the women, from the political parties of, from the women's communities, whereby they talk about the structural issues of the violence. And what we used to do, that we have a kind of the storytelling session also, and we used to ask the stakeholders who are from the representatives from the ward or the government or the community, we used to ask those stakeholders to repeat that story, so that they can emphasize, empathize, how women are feeling, so that they can also feel accountable, that, and also can understand that that was not the women's mistake. So there are many creative ideas also, we can put in place from our side. But being a guardian of the country, this role has to be, done by the government. So we have to engage more and more, because we are talking about shifting the attitude and behavior, and it's a process. It doesn't happen instantly, We need that kind of continuous process of dialogue and, a kind of advocacy. That's what we have been trying to do, actually. That's what we have been doing.
Okay, so if I could just line it up and sum it up a bit, the first thing that we really have to shift, Susan has told me before dozens of times to shift, is that we don't normalize violence, and we should never normalize violence. And the next thing is that we have to create an impactful action so that the government or the structural violence, the pinpoint of this issue, can be broken down one by one, piece by piece. We should start from there. And Susan has also mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken, wait. Okay, the signal is the signal here is a bit laggy again. Maybe just to sum it up, it's the two possible solutions from Susan. Again, start off from not normalizing it, not only from Nepal also, but also for Malaysia and also for Philippines and even India, Indonesia, and etc. And then the next thing is that we have to again create a purposeful action to urge, not only to propose, but to urge the government to stop this patriarchal action against women. Okay, again, maybe I should head to our president, Miss Nisha. Please do for her fiery. Please do, Miss Nisha.
Oh my God, you just made my day. Now I'm thinking maybe I should try to be president.
One day we will be invited in Malaysia by the president, Nisha.
Yes, please.
And we'll do a lot of government solutions about this, right?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
But everything that Susan said, obviously, I also agree with, because the like we said, the underlying issues are similar. But I think maybe one thing we should also touch on is to because as all of us know, it's such a challenge, right? What we're all going through and what we're trying to fix, right? Maybe what we should also look to is to think about the future and the next generations. So I think education is really important. maybe in our lifetimes, and I don't want to sound so negative, but maybe in our lifetimes, we may not be able to find the solution towards, a zero tolerance of violence against women. But possibility is that it may happen with the younger generation, especially if it is if gender equality, respecting not just women but respecting one another, and then also the process of actually not understanding that women are not objects to be sexualized, women are not taboo. When Susan was talking about the women in Nepal, and I feel like they put so much pressure on them, for them to be the icons of the family, right? That when something happens to them, then they blame them. It's actually a huge amount of pressure, but you put so much of pressure on them, you make them the icons of the family, but ironically, you don't respect them. So it doesn't make sense at all to me. It really doesn't make sense to me. And I'm Hindu and Indian, and even in the Indian culture, women are seen as the light. But yet, so many awful things happen to women, and nobody really takes care of them, or nobody really understands their viewpoint per se. So I think that this educational thing is going to be is something that we need to really, really work on to understand that women are not meant to be sexualized, women are not meant to be objectified. Women should be pushed forward. They should be seen as women have their own special things, and men have their own special I can't say anything nice about a man now, but men are also men definitely have also their own advantages, right? And we can actually really, really, really work well together. And was it you, Susan? I don't know, maybe it was Jean who said something about rape culture. And rape culture in Malaysia is already starting in schools. We have such a huge problem with rape culture, and it's made worse by the fact that we have also teachers who do not understand rape culture, and they treat sexual education, even sexual harassment or sexual violence, as something that's funny or it's not serious. So you can say I'm going to give you an example. We actually had a teacher who was ironically giving a class on sexual harassment, who actually told his students, and I believe his students were 17 years below, 16, 17. He told the boys in the class, if you want to rape a girl, choose somebody who is choose somebody who's above 18. Don't choose somebody who's underage, because then you'll get into trouble. And it's crazy, right? It's like, this is a teacher, right? And there was a girl in the class who actually put it out on TikTok, because she could not believe that he said it. And that created it opened up a huge can of worms, where we suddenly realized, she made us realize actually how rape culture is so prevalent in our country, and how slow the government, the Ministry of Education, and the government as a whole, I mean, I don't think it should be just the Ministry of Education, how slow the government was to actually react to this situation. And the teacher wasn't fired, mind you, the teacher was actually moved to a different department. He was taken out of the school. And actually, we till today, we don't really know what happened. But definitely it wasn't the act of punishment that we felt the teacher should have received. But the education aspect is so important, because especially now with kids using their social media, they get exposed to so many things. And we see also a higher number of rapes happening in our country, where not only are the survivors underage, but the perpetrators are also very young. And again, this is because they are getting exposed to a lot of things out there that they are not prepared. They're not quite because their experience and their level of knowledge is not quite prepared to understand what this whole issue of sexuality is all about, what this whole issue of sex is all about. So they only take it at that first level, right? And they see somebody else doing it. This person seems to be having fun. And this person is good looking, the other person is good looking, the girl who's getting raped seems to be enjoying it, or even if she's not enjoying it, all these boys seem to be approving of the act. So they absorb it and they process it in a very different way. So, and we're not paying attention to these kind of issues enough. And definitely in Malaysia, I'm going to just put this out. This is the one thing that we really need to look at, because so many things we are already doing so many types of intervention now, and we're moving very, very slowly forward. Sometimes we move one step, we get pushed back 3 steps. But I think the education part is something that we really need to pay attention to. And this is something, again, that we don't need to do alone in one country. This is something that we can actually do regionally. And I really think that we should start there. But that's my take. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, it is actually a comic relief. It is actually a comic relief when you told us. The teacher asked no. He even pointed out, yeah, you can just choose anyone, just not the underage. In my opinion, we're not Starbucks. You cannot choose whether we are large or regular size or small size. We're not McDonald's. So like, we are not objects. The girls are not objects. So it's very wrong for you to, the teacher I meant, it's very wrong for the teacher to just point out to the other students, there's a fun size McD out there waiting for you to be, raped or something. It is not something to be educated, since he is an educator. So a very nice point from Miss Nisha is that education, the bottom line of it, whether it starts from the family, the environment for the neighborhood, and also the educators to the students, and even college students, of course, also, since just to spill a bit, in Indonesia there are tons of violence against women cases to college female students, and it's beginning to make my blood boil again, since the case is just similar to Miss Nisha, when the educators just pointed out, hey, I like that girl, can she be like my underling or something in my department? And it's just so disgusting. So again, yeah, a very nice point of view from Miss Nisha to break down again the education system and the educators. A very nice point from Miss Nisha. Thank you so much. So we have here the ministry, Miss Jean. we have mentioned it from Miss Nisha. We have the ministry now, Miss Jean, if you may.
Yeah, thank you so much. So what can be done by what can ideally be done? Because I'm still speaking as part of the social movements or the civil society organizations. Let me just share some. So we have been empowering the survivors. So from a situation of lack of voices, from a culture of silence, especially because many of the survivors of violence also are widows, orphans of those killed because of the war on drugs. So it's a huge step for them to come out in rallies to demand for jobs, for alternative livelihood, and also for justice. So kabuhayan, katarungan, that is jobs and justice. So, and also even the widows in wheelchairs marched with us to demand for jobs and justice in relation to violence against women. We also filed legal cases against public officials because the president is immune, so we are able to file cases anyway against senators and other public officials. Like one public official who used a woman as a gift for another public official and put her in a box. So that's one of the practices that's so deplorable. And I think what you said, Nadine, treating women as objects is basically the bottom line of violence against women. It's about treating them as less than human beings, whether that's object or commodity or property. So that's the thinking of perpetrators. So we filed those cases. And also what Nisha mentioned as broadening of unities, of course, we have to go beyond our countries. There should be international solidarity against violence against women. So basically in Filipino, what's being said is power to women. And it's also important to resist against this very pervasive culture of patriarchy as manifested by violence against women and misogyny. So this is a very brave action of our young women in the face of a very misogynistic government. So we were being shouted at by men who were encouraged by the president to be so misogynist, but we stood our ground and we put our bodies in the streets and stop the traffic at the start of the government of Duterte. We also, so from huge structural actions, we have to go to the practical responses as well. So we also, I've already mentioned education at the community level, establishing trafficker watch mechanisms wherein the people are empowered to be able to spot possible cases of trafficking. And we had to train, of course, local governments so that they understand however difficult it is for us. No, but we have to train even those in uniform so that they stop the abuses. Otherwise, we will be charging them as well. We had to train also, especially local governments in areas where sex tourism is very high. And one of the strategies is give incentives to the local establishments that they will get a seal of gender-friendly tourism if they undergo anti-trafficking trainings. And they also call the attention of local authorities in cases of trafficking. We also had to train even religious leaders. So because still in many Asian countries, they are the ones who are being approached. So we had to train them on the laws, also to tell them that to settle cases in mediation is prohibited, so that they don't use religion to settle cases and send back victims to their homes. Otherwise, they will be charged. So we have to train them on survivor-centered response to trafficking. Of course, we have the usual education materials, and we also educate young men on gender issues, sexuality, and prostitution so that they don't add to the demand side of trafficking. So it's very important to educate young men so that we reduce the number of perpetrators as well. And they are advocating against all forms of violence against women. We have to target especially education in disaster areas because perpetrators take advantage of the vulnerabilities of women and girls in these areas and also post-conflict areas. And what's also important towards the resistance that I talked about earlier would be the healing process. Of course, we all do this, and the education of survivors on women's human rights, building their capacity on leadership and self-organizing and being able to mobilize so that they change not only their lives, but also the society in general. So these processes that we were doing in terms of supporting widows and orphans of extrajudicial killings, all forms of violence against women, such as psychological first aid, we have been transferring it online during the pandemic. So we have to put up posters. And you're right, Nisha, as we put this up, more and more cases come to us. So in the last 4 months, as I've mentioned, we have 500 cases. It's like 100 a month. We have to initiate cooperative type livelihood programs as immediate alternatives while we call for sustainable jobs with the government. So we know that a small livelihood is not enough, and that's why we always are part of advocacy of rallies calling for structural changes such as sustainable jobs. So for the public in general, we call to stop the culture of victim blaming, to counter gender stereotypes, connect victims to reporting mechanisms, demand accountability, and continue to raise awareness on the nature of all forms of violence against women. Thank you.
Such nice elaboration, and it's so neat. I love it. I really do hope that this continuous programs for you kept continuing and is sustainable and is able to help a lot more women who have dealt with the situation. Thank you very much, Miss Jean, and also CATW. Wow, okay, Miss Nisha, our president, please, you may have the floor.
Actually, I wanted to ask Jean. You do so much, and I really like your interventions, and I understand that you try to actually really touch the grassroots as well as the various different levels, right? So I know I'm sorry if I'm going to sound rude, but where do you get the money?
You know what? For a long time, we don't have it. I mean, to be able to mobilize in the streets, you don't really need money. We just have to bring our bodies. But of course, the grassroots won't be able to go to the streets without transportation, etc.
Yes.
So we try to to put together whatever resources we have to be able to mobilize ourselves. So it's very important to register our resistance. But a huge part also of our partner for a long time is the United Nations, offices, particularly United Nations Population Fund that's been working on gender-based violence. So it's very important that they really listen to us on strategies in addressing.
Okay, thank you. I think that okay, if I were president, I would fund you for sure. I really like those interventions. But I'm just thinking, like, even with Susan, right? Do you think the culture in Nepal and as compared to the culture in the Philippines, that it makes it a lot harder in Nepal to move forward? Whereas I always feel that in the Philippines, maybe because of the fact that I don't know, it's just that because I'm Indian and I identify with Nepal, and I always feel that we are so patriarchal in our religion, in our culture, in our everyday activities. Our movies are so patriarchal. The women are so always constantly treated as objects. And I wonder if something in Nepal, in something that happened in the Philippines could also be the interventions that are in the Philippines could also be carried out in Nepal, or would you actually have too much of a challenge?
Okay.
Actually, our context is very different,
Okay. Yeah.
Looking at Philippines, because we are a very much patriarchal country, and we also need to see a kind of intersectional dimensions of the violence. It is not only about men and women or others, what we say LGBTIQ communities as well, and also of the other marginalized community in terms of class or race or ethnicity.
Yes. Yeah.
So that kind of the diverse kind of intersectional dimension we have to be sensitive while we are talking about preventing. I would not only say gender-based violence, but violence as such. So it's a very, and also our government is always we are always facing a kind of unstable government. Political establishment is not been done yet, although we are in a state of federal structure, but still the laws, policy, it is not actually put in place. And also, although there is 33% of parliamentarian are women, it is already ensured in our constitutions. But I mentioned you that the misogynist languages, the mindset, the behavior, the languages, the behavior, the attitude, the given context, we need to work there a lot actually, and also going into the grassroots level, to shifting those notions. So it's a lot actually.
33% are women.
33% of our,
that is high.
It is ensured in our constitution, and it is almost there in the 44 and at the local level also we have a 40% women are there into the local levels, but most of the position are for the vice mayor are occupied by men, and the vice mayors are women. And still and still they are not reach into the decision making level. The meaningful participation is not there, although there is some kind of the position, the participation is there. And sometimes they used to say that we are upa mayor, that vice mayor, it is in Nepali we call it upa mayor, and they used to call it, we are not the upa mayor, we are a chupa mayor, we are the silent mayors, we don't have to that kind of situation is still there.
We call it it's not substantive participation. It's just like nominal participation, right? You're just there because you have to be the token. You have to just tick that box. Okay, we have a woman, but you don't really give her many decision-making roles. You don't give her authority. I understand.
Even in our local government, local structure, there is a justice committee, and it is led by women, but they are actually not being skillful enough. Actually, they need lots of capacity building training, And even they are also going into the mediation act while it comes to rape, so that kind of notion, still there are lots of understanding with regards to the treatment for the rape or treatment for the small disputes. They need a lot of classes or teaching or sessions with regards
Yeah.
to this kind of violence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Sorry,
uh-huh.
sorry, I interrupted. I took over. As my role of
No,
president. I took over.
it's super okay. I'm actually happy to see that we're doing a conversation, not only a very formal, webinar like you go next, but we're engaging actually, and that is what I hope when I invited Miss Nisha, Miss Susan, and also our ministry, Miss Jean, who has left now because she had a meeting in 5 more minutes. Yeah, okay. I think that is all the questions that I needed to be answered at the moment. And also, those are the questions that were given by the participants. Maybe from Miss Nisha and Miss Susan have a strong closing statement, like maybe a quote to just remind the participant, yeah, the participant, what should we remember from this webinar, because there has been tons of discussions, but what should be remembered one by the participants? Maybe we could start off from Miss Susan first.
Maybe let's work actually on the issues of structural violence. I always say that, I always said that let's work on shifting the attitude and,
Yeah.
behavior
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the given context. This is very necessary, actually.
Yes. Yes. I have to agree with her. I think it's about understanding the very basic issues, and I think that if we don't go down to the fundamentals, we're never going to actually see much of a difference. We're going to just keep on putting in resources and just we're going to run on the wheels.
True.
And maybe sometimes we'll make some progress, but then it'll probably come back again. So I think I'm just going to echo what she says. Let's focus on the structural issues.
True. Okay, so maybe Miss Nisha and Miss Susan have the same quote, have the same closing statement. Maybe I would just elaborate my closing statement of what I have written so far, by Miss Nisha, Miss Susan, and also Miss Jean. So, violence against women cases in Asia kept increasing. The cases, as stated from the speakers, are circulated towards not only to young people, which was ranged 15 to 24 years of age, but also for women who have aged way after 24 years of age. So this means that there are no women who are safe from the word violence. No category of women are safe. And this means that we have to take a lot of effort to abolish the number of cases one by one, and it also have to be encouraged by a lot of CSOs and encouraged by a lot of activities, since it will not change if the government is still in charge by their misogynistic characteristic and also patriarchal ideas. And of course, as Miss Susan stated before again and again, this should not be normalized, and it has never been normalized, which is why human rights enthusiasts, those who are watching this, let us spread awareness to the women in Asia that violence against women is not something to be normalized, and it should be shifted even to what can we do as the citizens of Asia to decrease the number of violence. We should also, for Miss Nisha, think about the future for the next generation through the education for zero tolerance against violence against women, because this is not to be tolerated by all. So the target also for the education is the educators, and also educating men for the decreasing number of violence against women. And also Miss Jean has added tons of her ideas from her CSOs, which can be added to all of CSOs in Asia, that we should also start the increasing number of campaigns to give several signs of resistance to the government and also to other misogynists, and also to empower communities to stop the abuses. So this is what I have concluded so far, and I have one quote from the goodreads.com. This is very interesting. Not all men practice violence against women, but all women live with the threat of male violence every single day, all over the earth.
That's
Speaking
very
facts.
good. That's
Speaking
very,
facts.
very good.
Yeah, speaking
Not
facts right
all
there.
men practice violence against women, but all women live with the threat of violence every day in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
Wow,
Strong
that's really
sentence.
good. That's good. It
Strong
is so
sentence.
true. It is so
Yeah,
true.
I know, right? That is
Yes.
why, because we have stated now, and we have also said that it is very true. Yeah, we need to la 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 la. That is why we need to abolish this at this moment, starting from now. Maybe starting from our collaboration, maybe in the future.
Yes, yes. Thank you so
Yes.
much for bringing us
Thank you.
together.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Omji. I'm also seeing Omji there who recommended me for this, platform. So thank you so much also for recommending
Thank
me,
you.
for
Thank
meeting
you
with such a
also.
beautiful,
Yes,
people
yes, yes,
actually.
yes.
Thank you so
It
much.
yes, I am very happy to be the moderator for Miss Nisha from Awam, Miss Susan from Nagarik, and also Miss Jean, who is already busy with her own businesses. So please let us again reunite sooner to our
Yes.
maybe collaboration for eliminating violence against women.
Yeah.
Okay.